Welcome to the video. This is now chapter 5 of Poker Fundamentals, which is you're in the big blind, you've called pre-flop, 40 big blinds deep as usual, we're against the hijack. The hijack is now c-bet. How do we want to respond? First of all, I'm going to look at paired boards. If you can see the report here, I've just filtered it to paired boards, every single paired board, and I've laid them out from the boards that we fold the most versus a c-bet first. You can see that 16.9% of boards are paired boards, very significant. And this is the global frequency of what we do. So on all boards, on average, we fold about a third of the time, we call about 46% of the time, and we raise around 20% of the time. Whereas on paired boards, we fold a bit more, folding 40%. We call a bit less, so we're calling only 35%, and we raise more, we raise closer to 25%, just to get a sense of our general response on these boards. This is facing the small c-bet size too, whereas when I look in on the specific boards, I'm going to AI solve and just give it one bet size. One of the first things to notice is that all of these boards where we fold the most are high card driven boards, which makes sense, right? Because as we looked at the hijacks range at the start, they have all of the offsuit Broadway combinations, meaning all the cards between a 10 and an ace, they've got all of, because they've got the offsuit combos and they've got the suited combos. So whenever it's paired ace, paired 10, paired queen, paired jack, paired king, any of these that are Broadway oriented hands, they're going to have the advantage. They're going to have more trips, more good trips, more overpairs, etc., more top pairs. And the other boards coming in are going to be ace low low and ace 3-3 and ace 2-2 because the big blind doesn't defend that many offsuit 2 and 3x. If I flip to the other side and I see the boards that we fold the least, this is your low connected board. So a 6-4-4, obviously we have lots of offsuit hands around this. We have 7-5 offsuit, 7-8 offsuit, loads of 6x, a lot more 4x. And all of these are just low boards. 8-5-5, 4-2-2, 5-5-2. I've pulled up quite a few different paired boards here that we're going to go through and just see if we can get a sense of how should we construct a strategy once our opponent c-bets. This is the first board, ace, ace, 10, rainbow. A very bad board for us as the big blind. You can see that without me even adjusting anything, the hijack wants to range bet for 25% pop. And this is our response strategy in the big blind. Just glossing over a few general things. A lot of our ace-x are actually fast playing. So it's quite easy to just think, I don't get much value from a check raise here, and my opponent has a lot of better ace-x, so I'm just going to play it as a call and let them bluff, value bet the river if they check, or just always call down. But there is a lot of value to be had in the check raise with ace-x, and if we don't raise enough ace-x, we really can't get away with bluffing, which is something that we do want to do as well. You can see ace-jack offsuit is pure, ace-10 is trapping here, although ace-10 suited seems to be raising. Ace-9 quite pure. A lot of the offsuit ones don't raise quite as often. Most of our 10x just want to call. Makes sense. There's not really any value to be had from a raise. We have the best hand more of the time, but it's a little bit dicey. King-queen likes to play quite aggressively, at least when it has a backdoor flush draw. Same with the queen-jack. King-jack kind of doing what it wants. King 10, starting to value raise with the spades. Now this is kind of interesting. The fact it likes to raise King 10 of spades on a board with no spade tells me that it's because it doesn't want to interact with your opponent's backdoor flush draws. So in this case, King 10 of spades goes for value because I assume your opponent will call the check raise with a hand like King 9 of clubs, King 9 of diamonds, King 9 of hearts. So there's a lot more value to be had when we have the spades. Whereas if we raise with the backdoor flush draw combos, one, we stop that caller when we both backdoor a flush, which is obviously good for us. It's a more playable hand when we check call. We can turn a flush draw and then have easy continues later on. So we negate that if we check raise and just win. And two, unblocking your opponent's continues. So that makes sense. We're calling ourselves when we have some of these king high backdoor flush draws. So it might be hard to find some of these calls with a hand like king 7 of clubs. Seems a little bit counterintuitive. The king 2 seems to like raising. I think that's because the 2 is a card that's quite out of the way. So when you have a 2 in your hand, it's much more likely your opponent has a hand that's going to fold because you don't have a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and all of these cards are often just going to bet fold the flop. And the king is nice because not quite strong enough to call, but does have a backdoor straight draw, does have a backdoor flush draw, has more ways to win, has some good barrels. So I can see why king 2 is a good raise, which is important to think about. Like king 2 is a better raise here than a hand like king 7. 10-8 offsuit, I'm not really sure about why this one likes to raise sometimes. It seems quite counterintuitive to me. And your jack 10 offsuit, your king 10, I guess it's the nut 10, it has a lot of value to be had. Even hands like 4-5 suited, so like a 4-5 of clubs here, which is free to a straight and a backdoor flush draw, is just folding because I guess it's just so far behind on a board like this. We'd much rather have a king high or a way to improve against 10x immediately. So if we do the small raise, and it's important to note as well that the 1.5 big blind bet is only being raised to 3.8. It's quite a small check raise, so that tells me that it's just folding out all your opponent's complete air. That's the only thing we're trying to achieve. And the hijack never folds with any Broadway combo. You can see here this big block, any two cards between a 10 and an ace. There isn't really any free betting going on because you're in position, it's shallow, you don't need to free bet to play for stacks. We're getting fold from the suited connectors, which are just whiffs. Hands like Jack 9 suited with a backdoor flush draw are floating, and Jack 8 suited, which your opponent might not find, whereas the king 9 suiteds are folding, and your opponent never folds with a 10, they never fold with a pocket pair. Even a hand like pocket 2s not folding to the check raise. Although remember, this is a product of this aggressive check raising strategy. If we node lock this spot to give your opponent much more of an ABC range, then the hijack's response is going to look completely different. So there's your first board. It's a bit hard to get your head around some of these, I would say, but a nice way to think about check raise bluffs is my hand reasonable on this board? I.e., do we have some backdoor equity? Can we turn a pair and beat a hand like second pair? But is it a little bit awkward to check call out of position? So a jack 9 with a backdoor flush draw, you've got 3 to a straight, you've got 3 to a flush, but you've only got jack high, so it does make a nice bluffing candidate. And having a picture card seems to be quite valuable given your opponent is never folding with 2 cards between a 10 and an ace. Anytime we have a picture card, we interact with that continue range. That's why I believe these queen jacks and king queens are being used quite aggressively. And the 10x is getting value from pocket pairs, I imagine. That's why it's raising sometimes. So that's your ace 10. Let's put that board aside for now. Now, ace 10-10, I want to see if this board operates any differently. For a start, the hijack is not range betting. A lot of people do, so I can force the range bet, but let's just look at it as if they're playing the theory way. And again, this is quite a hard check raising strategy to employ. You've got to find similar backdoor draws here with like 3 cards around the 10, backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw. 10x is raising quite aggressively. Ace 10 trapping, king 10 surprisingly trapping too, whereas the smaller 10x does really like to raise. When you have such an expanded calling range, obviously we don't just want to have ace x and straight draws and kind of backdoor hands. We do need to bolster that by having some trips in our range, so I can understand why not all the 10x wants to raise. Some of these small pocket pairs too, pocket 2s, pocket 3s are in there because they're very vulnerable. Again, they're quite out of the way. Similar reason to the king 2 being there. Having a 2 in your hand unblocks your opponent's bet fold, and having the king is good. The 4-2 suited is a little bit random. The jack 2 suited is a little bit random. Ace 9 with the backdoor flush draw. So in this case, the ace 9 prefers the backdoor flush draw because it wants to have more equity in the raising range, and the ace jack's the same. So ace jack of spades playing pretty much pure call. The more surprising thing here is it's a big check raise size. So on the last board, we went 1.5 to around 3.8. Now we're going all the way up to 6.4. So that's kind of a clue into bet sizing. When we check raised on the other board, we wanted to raise with all of these different trips and like some 10x. It was more of a nudge. We had more of the second pairs in the range, whereas here it's a lot more polarized. These boards are really tough because a lot of people will play in game and they might just check call with a 10 because they think when I raise, I just always have a 10. How am I supposed to balance a bluffing range on ace 10-10? The main thing to leave in your head is backdoor equity. If you're thinking in game, when I raise this spot, my opponent will always put me on a 10 and it looks so obvious, the best strategy will be to go nuts with these backdoor hands because they're going to overfold ace x at least in some point in the hand. And it's always better to be equity driven. So in this case, pocket 2s, pocket 3s, yeah, they can turn a boat and win a huge part against the 10. The queen jack hands block your opponent's strongest ace x. They block some 10x. They have equity in that they can hit straight. You almost want a way of getting out of jail, so to speak. You don't want to check raise hands that can't improve against your opponent's best hands. So even the king 2 suited, it does have a way out. It can hit queen jack. It can hit heart heart. Maybe it can even just hit a king and get there against a pocket pair. So if you think your opponent is particularly sticky or particularly ABC, you can go one way or another with this strategy. You can say, okay, these are the hands I've got permission to raise with. I'm just going to overdo it because I think I can get them to overfold. Or the opposite, I'm just not going to bluff raise the spot because I think my opponent will never fold an ace. They'll bet call, they'll call turn, they'll call river. I'm going to go ham with all my 10x and I'm going to get max value that way. So now quite a different board, 6-4-4 rainbow. Hijack betting 25% with a big portion of the range. And this board we want to raise very, very, very aggressively. One of the main differences being your opponent bets a lot, and they don't hit this board a lot. They have so many offsuit broadways. Remember that big chunk of hands we talked about? 12 combos of every single offsuit broadway. They're really going to have a hard time calling a check raise on this board. In practice, people probably will range bet on these paired boards. At least a lot of opponents will. And then the more your opponent bets, the more your bluff check raises are going to benefit. And also, the more your vulnerable value hands are going to benefit because taking down the pot now and the equity denial is still very good. It looks like we're very aggressive with 4x except for precisely ace 4. I assume that's because ace high is a hand that's going to call a check raise. So having the ace is bad. If you have an ace, it's more likely they have a hand like queen jack or queen 10 and then they turn top pair and they go for free streets and then we raise later on instead. Again, it's about the backdoor equity. Look at the frequency of folds, calls and raises for a start. 28.4% fold, 43% call, 28.6% raise. Then if I just look at spades, which is the no backdoor flush draw hand, see this fold percentage goes way up, this call percentage goes way down, the raise percentage goes way down. Spades obviously being the worst suit. You don't have a backdoor flush draw. Still playing super aggressively when we have trips. Not playing quite as aggressively with just these top pairs. You can see these top pairs are raising a lot when they have backdoor flush draw. It's more about being equity driven in that case. Whereas the best top pairs still raising, sure. They're so strong that they don't care about having a backdoor flush draw. If I exclude spades instead, and we look at just the backdoor flush draw, a hand like Queen Jack is always raising, not wanting to just check call out of position with Queen High, which considering it's just kind of two random overs with a backdoor flush draw, a little bit surprising. King Queen strong enough to call, Ace Jack, King Jack can call. A lot of this check raising just from two cards which don't even have a backdoor straight draw, they're just two overs with backdoor flush draw. At least these hands with an 8 or a 7 you can think maybe backdoor straight, so it seems a lot more intuitive. Some of these hands are quite hard to find, I would say. Queen 9 of hearts. Whenever you have that tick mark in your head of, my hand feels a little bit too good to fold, two overs backdoor flush draw, but it just doesn't work that well in the call range. Check call though, Queen 9 of hearts. It's not going to be the best. You're often just going to check fold the turn. You might improve to a flush draw on the turn and face another bet and already be in a tough spot with a bare flush draw out of position. And if we go to the offsuit hands, and then there's even more random raises with hands like King 9 of spades, King 9 offsuit with the King of spades, King 8 offsuit. A King 5, you've got 3 to a straight, it feels a little bit more intuitive. Ace 5 again, a little bit more intuitive that you've got 3 to a straight. Ace 7, I think a lot of people would just play check call with a hand like this. Let's see how the opponent responds to the check raise. And again, it's a big check rate size, 1.5 to 6.4. So we're saying we've got a good top pair or trips already when we do this check raise. We're not nudging equity so much. When we do the big check raise, not much free betting going on. Your opponent is supposed to call with Ace 8 offsuit. I guess that's the backdoor straight equity. That makes it better than Ace 9. Ace 10 calling quite a lot of the time. Ace Jack calling a lot of the time. Even King Queen calling sometimes. It's quite hard to get to these defense frequencies against the check raise. Even Queen Jack of hearts facing a big check raise here, you don't feel great. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that people are massively overfolding to this node, but as a generalization for the population, I think when you do this big check raise, I don't think people are going to bet call King 9 of hearts enough. I don't think people are going to bet call Ace Jack offsuit enough. Quickly pulled up 644 flush draw just so we can see if there's any differences. It's going to be very similar as we saw in the past. Rainbow and flush draw aren't that far apart. On flush draw boards, at least there's only 2 flush draws to worry about and work with because there's not those free backdoor flush draws. Here, the big blind default response, it really likes having a heart in the check raise range for the offsuit hands because it's a backdoor flush draw. It makes sense. And the hands that trap generally will have a heart in too because they can kind of hold their own more. You can see the King 4 offsuit, the King of hearts here is the one that doesn't check raise. King 7 with a heart, check raising very aggressively. King 8 with a heart, check raising quite aggressively. Always preferring the bigger heart too, so King 8 with the King of hearts specifically. You can see a lot of these just 2 overs, 1 heart. 10-7 offsuit with the 10 of hearts. It's 2 backdoor straight draws, and it's a backdoor flush draw. It can't win at showdown. A very aggressive check raising strategy with these 1 heart offsuit hands. Mostly just folding the less than ace high spades or clubs, the no backdoor flush draws, whereas flush draws can play quite aggressively now because they're such high equity hands. Backdoor flush draws are kind of mixing either way, like your Jack 9 of diamonds deciding to call, whereas your Jack 7 of diamonds starting to raise. So you can kind of go either way with a lot of these hands. You can see that 8-7 likes to call without the backdoor flush draw mainly, but raise when it's got a flush draw or backdoor flush draw. Very equity driven check raising strategy. King 6, it prefers the diamonds because it's got a backdoor flush draw as opposed to the King 6 clubs. 4x is going super ham, even ace 4 raising every time now. The board's more wet. Pretty much a pure raise 4x strategy, except for some of these offsuit King 4 and ace 4 with the backdoor. King 2 of diamonds actually good enough to continue on this board. 6-4-4. Bad backdoor straight draw, second nut backdoor flush draw, and can go either way. So again, a lot of counterintuitive hands. The 5x of diamonds likes to play quite aggressively, it seems. Queen 5 of diamonds, King 5 of diamonds. Same with the King 5 offsuit with the 1 heart. So 3 to a straight, backdoor flush draw. That's kind of your bluff tools in this spot, at least in theory. So that's your 6-4-4 flush draw. Ace King King. Opponent bets about 60% of the time in theory here. We want to raise quite aggressively with our King X. Our top pairs, not so much. The Ace Jack, I guess, is the best ace we have, so that's getting in there sometimes. And then raising sometimes with these gut shots, like 10x of hearts also has a backdoor straight draw, same with Jack X of hearts. Some of these lower flush draws in there sometimes. 4-2 of hearts also has a backdoor straight draw, 3-2 of hearts. There's kind of a bit of everything going on here. The pocket 2s, pocket 3s come up quite a lot because if you turn the boat with those hands, you have a really nutted hand that's quite disguised as well. And they're the most vulnerable to overcards and they can be counterfeited the most, so taking the pot down now is really good for these 2s and 3s. Queen 6 with the Queen of hearts, quite hard to find, but the Queen of hearts is backdoor nut flush draw, so that's pretty powerful. Also a backdoor straight draw. Queen 7, good enough to even just call. There's no backdoor diamond check raising going on here on this board. There's no raising around offsuit hands without heart in them. Having 1 heart in your offsuit hand is pretty key, and having 2 hearts in your suited hands is pretty key. Next board, King 9-9, 60% bet frequency for the hijack. Again, most of our raises are situated around trips. We raise a little bit of the best top pair, but that's kind of it. So the ace jack on when there was an ace on the board, the king queen in this case. And the raises here mainly coming from backdoor nut flush draw. So your ace x with the ace of hearts is check raising very aggressively. That ace of hearts is a very powerful card here. Even some of these offsuit queen highs, jack highs, raising around just having the queen or jack of hearts. This time backdoor flush draw is a candidate, but I guess ace x backdoor flush draw is kind of different because we also have an overcard. You need more than just backdoor diamonds. You also, like in this case, we need either an overcard or a gut shot. Alternator diamonds, I guess, is free to a straight flush. And then all of these random hands are just going to be hearts. if we just look at the flush draw combos. Flush draw is playing very aggressively. It likes having a 10 queen or jack quite a lot because these also have backdoor straight draw and no showdown. The nut flush draw is always very powerful, whereas some of these bigger flush draws can hold their own. So the question you should ask yourself when check raising is, does my hand have good equity? Am I going to be made to check fold the turn if I check call the flop? If you check call the flop with jack 2 of hearts and your opponent bets the turn, you're probably going to be made to fold on most turns unless you hit a pair or some more equity. Whereas if you're ace 10, ace jack of hearts, queen jack, queen 10, jack 10 of hearts, you know, no matter what that turn is, you're going to be able to continue. Also, this ace jack and ace 10 have some showdown. You can actually have the best hand. It's a bit random with the smaller flush draws, just raising sometimes, calling sometimes. I guess it just tries to not always have certain cards, like don't always have a 5, a 4, a 3. And it's the big check raise size again. And when we check raise, we do get folds from ace queen. Maybe in practice, ace queen is calling too much. I'm surprised to see ace queen with the queen of hearts folding so much versus a check raise, to be honest. The gut shot's liking to continue. I guess in this case, because we don't really check raise a king very often, we're mainly saying we've got a 9 or a bluff. Therefore, having an ace is not as valuable. Like a hand like queen jack can turn a hand that beats a 9, whereas ace queen can't. So the gut shots are actually more valuable here. Again, the pocket pair is not folding to check raise. When you turn a boat with a pocket pair, you always stack a 9. So that's a really good future game for all these pocket pairs. So that's king 9 9. We've got 2 more boards left. 9 9 6. It's very notable when the 9 is the paired card because our opponent doesn't have very many offsuit 9x. So this time we are raising very aggressively, 35% of the time. Looks like most of our range. We're continuing way more with raising than calling in this case. 6x is raising quite aggressively. 9x obviously raising very aggressively almost every time. Gut shots raising quite aggressively. Straight draws. Pocket 2s again. Second pair with backdoor draws. 8-6 likes to be equity driven. It likes to have the backdoor flush draw with it. The 8-6 of spades playing more passive. Same with the queen 6 and the jack 6, whereas king 6 looks like it doesn't care. It just raises because it's a strong enough hand to raise. High card hands liking to call more, so your king queen, ace jack, ace 10. Although king queen of spades going for the nearly pure raise is pretty wild. And the king jack of spades as well. Or yeah, these suited Broadway hands playing very aggressive. Jack 10 backdoor, just pure raise. Even queen 10 offsuit going for a raise a lot of the time. But this is a very aggressive check raising range that I suspect not many players are getting close to. Some of these ace high backdoor flush draws raising. So let's see how our opponent responds again. No free betting, mainly getting folds from this offsuit portion. Honestly, this board is really tough. It's one thing to find a lot of the raises with your trips and a lot more of your top pairs, especially with backdoors. Some of these hands, like your king 8, queen 8, jack 8, free to a straight, free to a flush, I think they're at least somewhat intuitive or having a direct straight draw. I think some of these hands you could easily think would be better to call. King 10 of hearts, king 10 of diamonds, because if they turn an overcard, they're actually fine to call down and it's nice to be there in that range. Anything less than king queen high isn't actually that lucrative in the call line. They're deciding to play much more aggressively instead. King 8 offsuit, playing so aggressively. That's just free to a straight, not even a backdoor flush draw. One more board I want to look at is king 2-2. Another board I suspect we'll see a lot of range betting. This board is quite unique in that we really don't play many calls. Look at this, 42% raise, 6.7% call. This is wild. All of the 2x is just going crazy. We only have the suited 2s, so I guess because we don't have the offsuit 2s, it's not like these combos quickly mount up. This time it is only a small size, so that gives you a clue that we're not just saying we've got trips, and you can see here from the range we raise with king x a lot. The king 4 offsuit all the way to king queen offsuit is almost pure, and a lot of these king x suiteds. The king x suiteds preferring to call generally being the spades, although again there's a bit of randomness. If we're going to have calls, king x of spades is going to be the combos to call. King jack not needing the backdoor flush draw, it's just so good. It can be really counterintuitive to raise with ace 10, ace jack, a hand like pocket 8s. Like sure, some of these backdoor hands when you have less than ace high, like your jack 9 of backdoor flush draw, your queen 8 backdoor flush draw, I think some of these are a bit intuitive, or even like a 3 cards to a straight and backdoor flush draw here around the 2. So you have 5-4, 5-3, 4-3, 5-6, 8-7, bit random, 9-8, bit random, 10-9, I can see it. There's the 2 backdoors going on. Ace 3 all the way up to ace jack in offsuit combos. This is really, really wild to me. What if I just node lock this strategy? I'll make him just fold a lot of these high cards and I'll just get him to call, let's say up to like king 10. Let's say they call with all of these ace high backdoor flush draws too. Don't raise with them. They call with all of these ace highs, so ace 8, ace 9, ace 10, ace jack. And I'm going to say fold these ace x spade combos up to say ace 9, sure, let's call. Raising with all the 2x, yeah. And I'm going to lock this strategy, which I think it's still like more aggressive than I would expect people to be, but it's a lot more conventional for people to just play very call happy strategy. And once we do that, the hijack range bets for a start, which is why this is it's such a circular game, right? That The subtlest difference in either player's strategy can make one player just go, yeah, I'm always going to do this. I'm either always going to raise, or I'm always going to bet, or I'm always going to do X, Y, or Z. That's why it's always really important to look at these subtle changes. I'm going to show you the EV difference of just looking at this compared to the check raising range. This is still the small check raise size, so in practice we should probably change the check raise size to a bigger size as well. I've just changed the bet size to a bigger raise size, and I've plugged in pretty much the same thing again, which is just going to be call with some of these ace highs, raise with your 2x, raise with some bluffs. Don't start raising until you have around about king 10 or better. And I've left kind of the same bluffs in. And if I lock that strategy, just to make sure that if it's the bigger raise size, it doesn't change anything significantly. And we still have this range bet strategy in the hijack. Just to finish this video, I want to show you the EV difference of something like this. This is the original solver strategy. It's betting 20% with most of its range. Bet 20%, and now it's on the big blind. Let's see the EV. 5.33 EV in the hijack. So that's 5.33 big blinds we make on average in this hand. That's a lot. That's 533 big blinds per 100 for people that look at it that way. That's a really high EV spot for us that this floppers came out and we've bet. And this is with the big blind playing this ludicrous raise strategy around ridiculous amount of hands. Now that I've known like the big blind to raise with 2x and raise with a lot of bluffs, maybe a lot more bluffs than people do in practice, but sure, let's give them credit and just call mainly with these ace highs, which is more intuitive. Call mainly with the top pairs and start raising with just the strongest top pairs. This is probably a better strategy than a lot of people employ. And let's just compare the EV. So remember 5.33. Now, what does it go to? 6.08 compared to 5.33. That's 0.75 big blinds more that we made in this spot. And this is the range c-bet, remember, as well. If we look at it in big blinds per 100, that's an extra 75 big blinds per 100 that we make just because our opponent employs this strategy instead of this strategy, which is really, really hard to do. So I hope that's a good window into responding as the big blind, at least on paired boards for now. One, if your opponent bets too much, we should check raise very aggressively. Two, if your opponent doesn't call enough versus check raises, we should check raise even more aggressively. And if your opponent is not check raising enough, then we should bet more aggressively. It's just more and more reasons for more aggression the more that you don't see your opponent being creative enough. And our aggression in response to their passivity is going to generate so much EV for us in some of these spots. Just in this example, we looked at the EV difference, but some of the EV differences can be even more significant than this. And this is just one example of one board in one hand that we just made an extra 75 big blind because we decided to range bet, and our opponent was playing actually decently by finding a lot of these raises, but just not raising enough with the ace X and the king X that they're supposed to. Also, it does assume that we're responding with this back. We need to know that ace queen's mainly a fold now. We need to know that our pocket pairs still can't fold. For the reasons we spoke about before. Can't fold some of these backdoor straight flush draws, and we never fold top pair. But still, it's just knowing these really subtle differences. That's a really expansive example of paired boards, all the different types of paired boards, the ones that we check raise the most, the ones we check raise the least, some of them where we range bet, some of them where we don't. All right, that was chapter 5. Continuing versus c-bet on paired boards. Thanks for watching.